Um, Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Shuki Eytan. He's the kind of business leader who doesn't just aim for results, he demands them, right, Shuki? So I hear, anyway. He's the managing director at Cultura for their media and telecoms business. Shuki's got a reputation for being a results-driven leader, and he's got huge experience in building global businesses. Three things that really matter to Shuki: execution, right? Decent haircut, yeah. Results and an unwavering commitment to excellence. In other words, if there's a mountain to be climbed, Shuki's the man to get you to the top with speed, yeah, and proficiency. No Sherpas required, right? He likes carrying it all on his own back. Yeah, today Shuki's going to deliver a session for us titled Enterprise Sales, the Good, the Bad. And I've got written down here the beautiful, but he called me last night to say, no, it's no longer beautiful, it's now bizarre. All right, so we're doing the good, yeah, the bad, and the bizarre of enterprise sales. How many of you are in enterprise sales? Great, yeah. You can tell me whether he's bullshitting or not. Right? And he told me, just sitting down there just now, no bullshitting, Colin. A couple of fun facts about Shuki that you will not find on this man's social media profile. He's originally from Iran. Yeah, him and his family, when he was aged 8, and he's a little bit older than that now, yeah, made Aliyah. So here he is, early on in his sales career, not when he was 8, but a little bit older. Right, here he is, early on in his sales career, and he meets a Persian German. Yeah, so what do you think he tries to do in order to influence that deal? He speaks to the guy in Persian. He's like, yes, I've got this nailed. Yeah, I'm there. Yeah, the guy speaks my language. Woohoo! Didn't win the deal, so it didn't work, did it, Shuki? The other thing is, I don't know what a Mossad agent looks like. Yeah, all right. Yeah, we know where we're going here. How many of you have travelled on business or pleasure? How many of you have gone through Moscow? All right, we now know where this is going, right? Shuki was once late for his connection in Moscow. Yeah, and he's in such a rage, like, rushing for his aeroplane that he comes to security. And they've stopped him, and there's a big queue. So he goes rushing to the front. And he's like, excuse me, Mr. Security Officer, do you know who I am? I'm Shuki. Yeah? All right. They took umbrage at it, and they held him for 2 hours, yeah, interrogating him, thinking that he was a Mossad agent. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I welcome Shuki Eytan to the stage. And Shuki, I've got this for you. I've got this for you. But also, because you're climbing mountains with those enterprise sales, you need a little compass to know where to go, right? So here's a little gift from me to you.
Thanks so much.
And hopefully this works. You might need to turn that on as well, my friend. Is it on? Yep, looks like it.
Works? Thanks very much, Colin. Very good to see everybody here. How's everybody doing? Yeah. Okay. So we're going to talk a bit about enterprise sales today. I think that I'm very lucky that I was able to do both transactional kind of packaged sales, but also complex, very, very long enterprise sales that we do in our business, and like other companies do. So I wanted to use this opportunity to give everybody some tips about how it works or how it should work based on our own experience. The Cultura templates look like a tambour truck exploded next to the presentation, so bear with me with all the colors and everything. So let's start with what do we consider as an enterprise sales. So there are a few different definitions for that, but the definitions that we'll use. So first of all, we're selling to companies that have a revenue of more than $1 billion every year, that have 1,000 employees or more, usually much, much more than 1,000 employees, and that the TCO that we're trying to create with those companies is around $8 million a year at least. We're starting with 1 million ARR in the first year and then climbing to the fifth year, so roughly $8 million in terms of TCO of 5 years. Then the decision making on those companies is super, super complex. There are so many stakeholders that you need to get to consensus around every time a new person steps in and you think that you finalized everything, and then a new person comes in and you need to close things from advanced with him. And the sales cycles are very, very long. So we have cases that we started with a prospect at some point and then closed the deal after 3.5 years. We got a verbal after 2.5 years, and then it took 1 more year to sign the contract. So you need to have people that are used to have long-term relationships and kind of can handle that kind of scenario. And the third thing is that those solutions or those customers are usually very, very heavy in terms of their IT stack, in terms of their privacy requirements, security requirements. You need to integrate into very, very legacy IT stack. So your product also needs to be used to do all of that. So those are the definitions that pretty much I came up with in terms of an enterprise sales customer. And going into an enterprise selling to such kind of customers that are not transactional customers that basically come and tell you jump, and you need to ask them how high to jump, because that's the only way that they're used to work with their vendors, with their suppliers, with their partners, requires actually a different mindset in terms of the whole company. If the company is used to do transactional sales for small, medium markets, and then they go into enterprise sales for the first time. So it really requires your mindset, the DNA of the company, to change almost completely. So what do you need to take into consideration when doing that? The first thing is that you need to invest the necessary resources to get into enterprise sales. It means massive ABM into the specific account that you want to go in. It means intelligence, information about the company that you want to go in. We had many cases that we stepped into a room and we knew the people and the company better than they knew themselves. Because you're getting to a meeting, there are so many different stakeholders from different organizations, different teams in the company, usually with contradicting KPIs, and they don't know each other. They meet each other for the first time, some of them, and you know them better, or at least you need to know them better than they know each other, because that's the only way to get to a consensus around them, to onboard all of them to the same mission when they have contradicting KPIs, and many of them don't want to go into new projects. So you need to invest a lot of resources in that context. Some cases you need to propose to write the RFP instead of the customer, right? So there are many cases that we came along and said, let us write the RFP instead of you. So that's a heavy lifting to write the RFP instead of the competitor, instead of the customer. You need to have door openers locally because they're used to work with specific people in that market that they are familiar with, usually executives that were working on that company. And then you need to be able to fly and meet them from today to tomorrow. They might say, okay, come tomorrow, come the day after tomorrow, come next week, and you need to be able to do all of that. So really change in mindset. The whole organization, product, R&D, integration strategy into legacy stacks, legal jargon of your company, all of this needs to change to work with such a magnitude of customers that are not used to something else. So enterprise sales is high CAC, customer acquisition cost. It is very, very high to retain or to gain an enterprise customer. But then the other side of this is that it is also high reward. We're going to talk about that in a second. It requires people that have the stamina for, as we said, long-term relationship. So if the customer, that you're trying to create a rapport with, wants to take you out for a club with the most horrific songs and the ugliest people around till 4 a.m., so all salespeople will do that. But in enterprise sales that take 2 years or 3 years, you need to be able to do that in length. There were some cases, for example, that I was getting to Japan, I decided that I want to study Japanese, not because I'm going to talk fluently Japanese, but because I'm creating a better rapport with those people. They see that I try. You need to know the local culture better. You cannot just step into a room in Japan and sit wherever you want. There are very, very clear rules for that. So there is a lot of heavy lifting that is correct for any kind of sales, but certainly for enterprise sales that are very, very long cycles, a lot of meetings that are face-to-face that require really a different kind of mindset. And then the last thing is that it's hard to get into enterprise customers, but it is much, much more difficult to get out. So you need to mess up really big time to be kicked out of a customer after you won it. So there is a lot of heavy lifting in the beginning, but it's worthwhile eventually because your TCO, the fact that the revenue along the years is going to stay very high. So those are things to take into consideration before getting into an enterprise sales. And then let's talk a bit about how we negotiate enterprise sales. Again, saying similar to many other cases that you're negotiating or selling, but with some specific tips in the context of enterprise sales. So the first thing is that given those sales are very, very long in the timeline that it takes, usually a few months, the best case, 1 year, maybe 1.5 years in some of the more reasonable cases. You need to have a very well planned or thought through negotiation strategy, which is something that we Israelis don't usually like to do, but you need to really plan your negotiation strategy. What you're waving to give at any given point. Because every time that you think that you're done, somebody new comes to the room and say, no. So that's my manager, and we need to start from the beginning, and he wants something else. And every time that you think that you're done, somebody else steps into the room. So you really need to be very clear with yourself what your red lines are, and with the organization, with your own organization, and also what you're willing to waive at any given point. What we do very well is that we have a very clear anchor from day one, and we stick to that anchor. So that anchor can be half fake in some cases, or it can be really real. But when you stick to a very, very clear anchor, then the customer, if he wants you, and if he sits with you, he probably wants you, will need to understand your limitations and restrictions. So this anchor can be, I need to get to 70% gross margin, or I need a TCO of this and that over 5 years, or I need this kind of profitability, or whatever it is. But having a very, very clear anchor in those kind of sales that take so much time helps you eventually to get to the numbers that you want to have. Use the art of swapping to create a win-win. You would be surprised how the KPIs of buyers within enterprise sales are very, very specific. So we had a case that, for example, we wanted to have in our standard payment terms, we have net 60 payment. The buyer wanted net 30, which is better for us. So from day one, he was talking about, I want net 30, I want net 30. And we didn't agree to net 30, despite the fact that it's better for us, because that's the KPI that is measured against his manager or something. So eventually you swap things that are important for you with things that are important for him, because he has very, very specific KPIs. So think what is important for you and try to understand what's important for him, and then you can swap this. Secondly, understand the KPI, their KPI, what they are measured against. And as I said, there are very, very specific things that they are measured against. What is their journey? Who is the ultimate decision maker? Surprisingly enough, in some cases, even they don't know who is the decision maker. So if you ask them 1,000 questions, and it is fantastic to ask so many questions, eventually they need to come up and understand better how is their internal journey that helps you eventually to get to the place that you want to be. Read the room. So as I said, a few people from few different divisions step into a room with contradicting KPIs in a very, very big organization, and you need to create a consensus between them. Very tough. Some of them are peers that don't want to get to an alignment. Some of them don't want new projects. Some of them don't want to go into an adventure that takes now 3 or 4 years or so. So reading the room, some people want just to get their KPIs. Some of them want just to impress their team members or their peers or their managers. Some of them just want a hug and recognition. So it's really important to understand the different contradicting interests of different people in the room and try to get to a consensus. And it's also okay to divide and conquer, meaning given different people have different interests, so from one team you can get one thing, and from a different team you can get a different thing. That's the way that these things work in such big organizations. Then I was surprised. Usually you wouldn't imagine buyers as very charming people, but I was surprised how charming and with charisma, and how strong some buyers are in some organizations. Sometimes in some organizations, the buyers, the procurement managers, are the strongest people in the room, because they are in charge of the L in the P&L, and they need to bring the best results based on the decision of the business owners. So you also need to be ready to have some procurement drama and not get too excited by that. So we had, for example, a case that we were bidding head-to-head with a very, very large Chinese vendor that everybody knows. And we were stepping into the last round of negotiations somewhere in West Europe. And we had a KPI that we had to meet based on our CFO need. And our customer, our potential customer, the prospect, had a different KPI that was almost 180 degrees the other KPI. And we didn't agree. We just didn't agree to that KPI because our CFO would not approve this. So what they did, he got really upset, the buyer, the head of procurement in that company. So he opened the door and he showed me 20 Chinese people standing just behind the door. And he said, if you're going to fuck me, I'm going to fuck you and I'm going to choose them. And he was really real about that because we were bidding head to head. So you need to be ready to some procurement drama. Eventually, we agreed that in year 1, 2, 3, we'll go based on his KPI, and in year 4, 5, we'll go based on our KPI, and everybody was happy. Or we had a case that a buyer stepped into a room, first time that we meet him, the buyer, the head of procurement in that company that reports to the CFO, and before saying hello, he started banging on the table with his baseball bat. So it's really nice to have those adventures with buyers, and you need to recognize the fact that buyers in such big organizations are very, very important and very strong people, and they are used usually to have what they want because they go into those negotiations with companies that eventually want to be on those with those deals. If you have your negotiation strategy and structure ready in advance, and if you have your anchors and your logic, you'll probably also get what you want by explaining what you want and being calm. And then the last thing, going into those deals is very important in terms of managing internally too. Now, you don't need only to manage the customer externally, but also managing internally the stakeholders, the CFO, the CTO, the R&D, the CEO. Those kind of deals take a lot of time. There are a lot of ups and downs. There are a lot of changes. There are a lot of movements, and everybody needs to be ready for that. Acknowledging and celebrating small wins along the way. As I said, it takes a lot of time to close those deals, so you need to acknowledge wins along the way. And when you go and win an enterprise deal, a 7-digit deal for the first time, it's a huge activity to do till you get to that momentum. So you need to celebrate and acknowledge with the team that is working very hard to get those results along the way. And then last thing, I just took, so this part of the presentation summarizes in a couple of words the fantastic things that Nir was talking about, and is super sharp about those things. This is really a good opportunity for the company to start scaling up and working in a different way rather than a startup mode. So So enterprise deals that requires the company to change almost its DNA upside down, requires the company to be a bit more bottom-up oriented rather than top-down, right? In Israel, there are a lot of entrepreneurs. Everything is top-down, especially in early startup stages. But we need to start working bottom-up to empower the people to take decisions in their own domains, to start measuring everything. So this is really a fantastic opportunity when getting into such deals to start working in a different way that is a bit more organized, a bit more roles and responsibility oriented. And I think that it's also super valuable for the company to continue growing and moving from SMB kind of mode to enterprise mode, and then gaining more enterprise customer as time goes by. So this is pretty much my presentation. Seeing if there are any questions or anything that I can address, happy to do so here or after. Yeah. So eventually, I am a very strong believer that it's not only you selling, but also them buying. So it's very, very important from day one to emphasize your value proposition and your competitive edge compared to the others. And I think that if you have a very clear strategy from day one of your negotiation and very solid argument set in ground, not only about your pricing, but also about your value proposition and how they connect to each other. Because eventually, if they want you to reduce your TCO by 40% or so, and it impacts the product that you're delivering or the service that you're delivering, is not something that is in their favor. So there were many, many cases that the discussion in the examples that we had were not even about money, were about the value proposition and what exactly they want to get. If they want to get something very, very cheap and very local, they can go to get they can choose a local vendor or a Chinese vendor that God knows what's going to happen with it in a few years, and choose them. So I think that you need to really combine in the best way, not the discussion around commercials with the discussion around the value proposition. And as strong as you are and confident about your own value proposition, it makes them more confident about this. And assuming that they sit in front of you, they probably also want to buy from you. And if they continue negotiating with you for 6 months or 9 months or so, they want to buy from you. And that's why having a very, very clear negotiation strategy from day one is super, super important.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Shuki Eytan.